All right, so you intrigued me when you said that you were doing a daily mass.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so the first question that I have is, what is the requirement of a Catholic priest when you're actually engaged in some type of ministry, even if you were in the prison, or let's just talk about with Martinsville or Rocky Mount. Are you
Sure.
expected to do a mass every day?
Yeah, I mean that's generally expected. The real obligation would be Sundays. I mean,
Okay,
just like
right,
every Catholic is obliged to worship on Sundays, a priest is obliged to celebrate a mass on a
right,
Sunday. Um, but people like to come to mass on the weekdays, and it's good for the priest's spiritual life to celebrate mass every day. And
right.
so, generally speaking, I mean, priests get one day off a week when people understand. Like if it's in a situation that Martinsville, Rocky Mount, there's one day a week where neither of the places is a mass. And during my
Gotcha.
tenure, I was on Tuesdays. But then the other days of the week, there was always a mass, and a group of people would always come.
Now, did you do two daily masses for those on the days that you weren't off, or did you do like one on one Monday and Thursday for one
Yeah,
parish, and then
exactly. Yeah, Mondays and Wednesdays were St. Joseph, and Thursday and Fridays were St. Francis.
I got you.
And
And then
then
you did just Sunday masses. You didn't do any vigils on
the
Saturday.
Saturday there was Mass at St. Francis in the afternoon. Yeah,
Okay,
right. Which
okay,
was
and then
suffice for the Sunday, fulfilled the
okay,
obligation for Sunday.
I
Yeah.
got you. All right, so then you got suspended,
Hmm.
and but you're still doing mass.
Right. Right.
Okay,
Sure.
now do you do the whole mass? I mean, and you're in
Yeah.
this temporary housing right now, right?
Right.
So
Yes. Yeah.
so where do you do this? Just explain to me first. Explain to me how you do it, and then why do you do it?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the it's basically this a full mass. I don't give a sermon. I mean,
Right.
and the parts of the mass that involve a dialogue with the people are generally omitted. So that it's a little bit shorter. The greetings are omitted.
Right.
Um, the part right at the beginning of the Eucharistic prayer where you say, "The Lord be with you, and with your spirit, lift up your hearts. We lift up the Lord." I mean, the priest has to say that all by himself because that is a really important part of the Mass. So even
Right.
though there's normally a dialogue, that part is not omitted.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess the way I would put it is that the ministry of a priest flows from his life of union with Christ in the first place,
Right.
and so to stay united with him through the sacrament, special celebration of the Mass every day is really
Mhm.
the heart of the life of any priest, and even a suspended one,
Right.
right?
Right. Right. Well, and you're doing it to continue in the spiritual life that you were ordained for. I mean, so
Exactly.
it made
Right.
perfect sense, but I just thought, really, that's going to be really interesting. Now,
Right.
are there other priests? Is that a common practice that when they don't have a mass to say in the church that, so let's say they're on vacation or something, that they would still
Mhm.
say a daily mass for themselves and go through the whole Eucharist and the whole thing? Is that common or
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty common. Yeah, I mean, that every priest on the face of the earth says a mass absolutely every day. I mean, that's maybe saying a little bit more than is
right?
true. I mean, but generally speaking, even like I mean, many times spent family vacations as a priest with my mom and my brother at Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, and so I got to know the priests there over a bunch of assignments of pastors. Just by
Hmm.
whenever we were down there on the beach, I would go down and could celebrate the daily mass before we would all go to the beach. I mean, that was just part of our routine.
Right.
Uh, so, yeah, generally it's probably when you're on as a priest on vacation or your day off, you're probably going to wind up concelebrating more often than celebrating by yourself.
Right.
But you might celebrate by yourself also if there was a reason for it, and especially in
Right.
this diocese where we're all spread out so much. It's not like being at a beach. We would stay just a few houses down from the church, on our vacation, so celebrating was easy.
Right.
But
Right.
um,
And you
you
just
know,
go ask. You just go ask the priest, say, I'm here in town. I'd like to
exactly.
go celebrate. Do you have a problem with that? And I'm sure most of the time they're going to say sure.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, and we
Yeah.
became friends over the years. I mean, because we were there every year
Right.
in and year out for decades.
Right.
So,
Right. And when you do it now, were you doing it even when we were in quarantine? You still did a daily mass for yourself?
yeah, exactly. I mean, that's for me, kind of spiritually, this whole thing has been really interesting because when the quarantine started, but we weren't having the people come to mass at all. I
Right.
wasn't suspended. So, I mean, I
Right.
was saying right by
Right.
myself
Right.
because of the
But you're still
virus.
right.
And that was its own kind of spiritual path. I think for all of us as
Right.
priests, um, it's not easy, because it requires a little more faith, I guess, when you're there by yourself to
Hmm.
to do it. But I think the Lord had His plan for me. It set me on this path that I wouldn't exactly choose, but I mean,
Right.
the way things have worked out for me that um,
Right.
it's been 4 solid months of saying mass by myself.
Okay, now one more kind of specific question. Do you do the host and the wine? So are you consecrating both at the?
Yes, yeah, good. I
Yes.
mean, good question, but yeah, everything about the mass has to be done, fully. I mean, the only things that are omitted are those little, to say the Lord be with you to nobody doesn't really make a whole lot of
Right.
sense when you admit that.
Right.
But other than that, everything is in full, and certainly the Eucharistic prayer
Right.
is the full. It would be a pretty grave, even sacrilege, to omit any part of the
Right.
Eucharistic prayer. So.
Right. Right. Okay, now do you do this at the same time every day? I mean, what's your routine? I know that you're a runner. You told me you were a runner because you got bit by a dog when we first started
Right.
when we first
Yeah,
started
right.
interacting. So I know you run, but I mean, how do you fit this in your day the same time every day? What's your
Yeah,
routine?
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, actually, on Sundays, I tend to do it really very early in the day, and then the other days, actually, around midday is when I generally got in the habit of doing it. Yeah.
Okay, and you're always dressed for it. Do you have the vestments and everything?
Yes,
So
exactly.
you
Yeah.
always dress for it just like you would a regular mass at the church.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Now I'm not above wearing sandals when I'm by myself,
Okay. All
but I
right.
do, which I don't wouldn't generally do at church.
Right.
When
Right.
there are people there,
Yeah.
but yeah, I do vest fully, with the alb and the
Right.
cincture and the stole and chasuble. Right.
Right.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, are there any other changes to your spiritual life? I mean, how has this period of suspension changed you? Has it changed you in any way from a faith perspective? I mean, either
Yeah.
positive or negative.
Right.
Or
Sure.
have there been any challenges, or has it been enlightening in any way?
No, that's a beautiful question. I mean, I think it has required me to really go back to the basic like sources of a priestly spiritual life. I mean, I hadn't neglected them, thank God, by the grace of God, but to really focus on them, maybe more than I had been doing.
Hmm.
I mean, we not only would we say the mass every day, we pray the liturgy of the hours. I don't know if you've heard of that. We would recite from our breviaries the Psalms and read from the Bible in a way that's arranged according to the liturgical life of the church. And
Okay.
so that's a big part of our lives as priests. And then daily mental prayer, spiritual reading, mental prayer. I mean, I always did that. I mean, because really you do, if you don't keep your life of prayer going as a priest, you don't really have what you need to have to offer to the people as a
Right.
shepherd anyway. Um, but yeah, I mean, as far as just really the type, what the Lord is asking me as far as faith through this very unusual situation that I'm in,
Hmm.
um, it is, I think, is kind of drawing out from me depths of trust in His providence that I wouldn't have thought I was even cut out to have. I mean, because what the future holds for me is just not at all clear.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I gotta trust the Lord that His plan is for the best.
And can you even describe how that feels? Because one of the questions that I had is, and this has been a personal struggle. You sit there and you pray, and then you have either a feeling or you have a message that comes to you. And
Hmm.
I've always had the questioning of, is that me and my own ego saying
Hmm.
that? Because yes, you're absolutely right, Dale. That's a great idea. Go do it.
Right.
Or is it actually the will of God, and is it the Holy Spirit that's telling me? Is there any way that you can describe how that's changed for you, or how you said you had a deeper trust in understanding what you should be doing? Is there any way you can describe that to another human being?
Sure. No, bless you, Dale. I mean, that's a really good question and a very insightful one. I mean, the right, because the Lord does, guide us by those kind of interior movements that we have
Right,
when we pray. I mean, when we stay in communion with Him, then He does guide us that way. And part of prayer is opening ourselves up to that. But like you say,
right,
you don't know for sure that something that moves inside your soul is from the
right,
Lord or not.
right. Or from your own ego, or from Satan. I mean,
Right. Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
I would like to tell him, always speak in this ear. If I hear it in this ear,
Right.
thumbs up, it's your will. If it's in this ear, I got to start questioning who I'm hearing it from.
Right.
But
Exactly. If would that it were that easy, like you say, and
yeah,
that
yeah, it would be wonderful.
come on a green piece of paper, it's from God, and a red piece of
Right.
paper is from the enemy tempting you.
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly. So how
yeah.
do you know? I mean,
Yeah. You're right. I
is
mean,
there any way, just, I know it's probably going to be different for every person, but how do you know that it's gotten deeper through this time of persecution that you've gone through?
right. I appreciate your asking. Yeah. I mean, the commandments. We have to obey the commandments, and we have to regularly examine our consciences on the commandments, and
Mhm.
actually try to deepen our sensitivity to what is a violation of a commandment, because that's kind of a
Right.
lifetime of training
Right.
to really have our consciences as attuned to what the Lord demands of us all. As we progress in life. So that type of reflection, and then you know advice from other people. I've certainly through this whole ordeal having people I can turn to for advice,
Mhm.
who have not been afraid to tell me that the way I was thinking about something was wrong. People who
Right.
love me enough, and
Mhm.
respected me enough and I mean, I knew this was going to get kind of complicated, even starting last November. So I've had a
Mhm.
group of 4 advisors that I haven't made any decisions without consulting all of them
Oh, really?
uh,
Right.
pretty thoroughly.
Right.
And even just not just decisions, but just guiding my thoughts about how to
Mhm.
understand what was going on.
Right. Right.
You need people to help you, I think, get out of yourself enough. Uh, so but then of course, I mean, you've been there too. I mean, then if you're on the other side, if you're someone giving advice, I mean, sooner or later you got to say something like, well, what's the Lord telling you in prayer? What's your heart
Right.
telling you? I
Right.
mean, because
Right.
you need that's your ultimate source, all of us, for what the Lord is calling us to do. So, I mean, I guess in this case, because what is, I guess, to a certain extent at stake here is obedience as a priest. What exactly does that demand of a
Mhm.
person? Um, and so I've really had to study that pretty carefully and talk to a lot of other priests about that. About
Right.
how how should we really understand that in a way that uh, where we can have clear consciences about it when we're all said and done. And
Right.
um, and so I taking that in little steps, one little step at a time, is kind of how I found myself where I am now, where I feel the peace of, not that I haven't made mistakes, but that I am where I am now, honestly, and I get so I just have to ask the Lord keep guiding me forward,
Right.
and there's a lot of peace in that. Uh,
Did you have I guess the question I would have, if you have four advisors and you pick four advisors that think exactly like you do,
right,
then they become yes
right,
people.
exactly.
Okay, but ultimately it's your decision and your discernment of God's will and what Jesus Christ is asking you to do. But have you had, throughout that period of time, have you had anybody that was really, really 180 degrees opposed to the path that you were on? Have you had anybody that's really challenged you? And if you've had that person, have you had that person, Father Mark?
I,
Anybody who's really said, "This is terrible. Don't do this. You're gonna hurt yourself, or you shouldn't be doing this." Have you had anybody that's been
Oh yeah, I
striving?
mean, not among those four that have kind of been with me
Right,
all the way through, but they're not the only people I've talked to about this. I mean, there certainly
right,
are brother priests of mine, like one in particular, who told me I was on the wrong track the whole way along and explained to me how I was,
right,
and then there, and and there have been parishioners who have also urged me to go a different way at different
right.
points on the line here, uh,
Okay,
and I
so
think, I'm sorry, yeah, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead, finish up.
I was at and among the four that I've really counted on for advice, and in whom I've tried to open up myself completely so they could give me good advice. Um, they certainly, at different stages along the line, they have urged different things from what
Right,
it struck me at the time I ought to do. I mean,
right,
especially when it came to between November and March, just patiently and as humbly as possible, seeking some kind of way of compromise.
right.
I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, at no point did I really think there was much hope that that was going to work.
Hmm.
But they were right to kind of drag me kicking and screaming through all that. I mean, not
Right.
kicking and screaming, but
Go
making
through the
sure.
process. It was necessary. It had you had to give the bishop every opportunity to make things right, I guess.
Sure, yeah, and to give him the benefit of the doubt,
Right.
and to continue to do that,
Mhm.
and I do want to continue to do that the whole way through here.
Right. Right.
That maybe we could even resolve this sometime later today. I mean, that would be the
Right.
best thing that could ever happen,
Right.
and I need to be open to that. I mean,
Right. But when you were talking to the people who were like 180 degrees opposed to what you were doing, I'm assuming that you were trying to be as open to their opinion as possible.
of
Okay,
course,
because
yeah,
that's your nature. That's the way I know that you are. So
yeah,
I can understand that. And then in your quiet prayer after that, you have to kind of pass that through your head and say, okay, what do I do with that contrary information?
right,
Um,
right, sure,
and obviously you've started off on the same path, so that the contrary information hasn't changed. But how do you know that didn't change your path? Is it just the peace that you feel when you say, no, that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to continue to go in this path. Is it a peace? Is it a do you ever feel like you're on on the wrong road, or do you feel just as committed to this as you did when you started this in the fall?
right. Yeah, no, I appreciate your question. And maybe the way I would answer it is because the piece is important, but there's also, I mean, one thing I've had to do over and over again over the course of the past, 9 months at this point is explain to people who didn't think I was doing the right thing,
Hmm.
explain to them at least in a way they could understand why I was doing what I was doing.
Right,
And that to me is a pretty important part of the process because if I don't have a reasonable explanation for what I'm doing, then I shouldn't be
right,
doing it, and
right,
they may not agree with it, but at least at the end of the conversation, they could say, well, I understand why, that point of view. And I mean, like a lady from one of the parishes that I spoke with just yesterday, she had urged me back in February to stand down. This is not. She said her words literally were, "This is not your fight." But she told me yesterday she sees that she was wrong. That it is this is a fight that I
right,
had to do, and that it is the will of God that I would have gone down this road. So I appreciated her, having the humility
Yeah.
to do that to
Yeah.
me. It was really beautiful and
Right.
consoling for her to do
Right.
that.
But I love the idea that you have to be able to like articulate your position and feel confident within yourself and then test it out on other people, because
Right,
if you're fumbling over your, I don't know why I'm doing this, then
exactly.
obviously you're doing the wrong thing, or you haven't thought through it enough, or haven't prayed enough on it, or whatever. So I know we've had it in the other interviews, and you've said it several other times. What is the main reason you're doing this? And I would like you to at least um, talk a little bit about priests that might feel the same way that you do about the problems with the hierarchy of the church, but choose not to go in the same route that you're going. Because I
Right,
think there's probably a lot of priests that say, no, I'm just going to obey whatever the bishop says. I know that there's problems or whatever, but it is not my fight. Okay, so I,
right.
I can see priests being on both sides, and me feeling really good about both of the decisions that they made, even though they're 180 degrees out of phase.
Right,
Okay.
sure. Yeah, well, and I think that maybe I can answer this in two steps, and maybe hopefully that will help it make sense. I
Okay.
mean, this is not, I never wanted to be in this position.
Right.
I wound up here because I realized I had certain interests and insights and skills at obtaining and organizing information when it came to what had happened with Theodore McCarrick, the
Hmm.
man who ordained me, that I really had an obligation to use. I mean, that there weren't that many people in my situation where I was able, having been through those years myself, um, and able to understand different points of information that were available to the general public, but that most people would not necessarily know how to synthesize
Hmm.
to create a picture of what really had happened to the church, so to speak.
Right.
Uh, I mean, and I kind of stumbled into all that. I was just trying to deal with the whole thing for myself spiritually as best I could. I mean, try to understand what was going on
Hmm.
for myself and for the church. So, so that is what got me to the point where I had the conversation with the bishop that I had last November. I mean, that I had done that.
Hmm.
And I don't have any regrets about having done it. I regret about having expressed myself with anger on certain occasions when I did, when
Hmm.
I shouldn't, I should have calmed down before I hit publish a few
Hmm.
times. I think it's safe to say.
Hmm.
But as far as the sum total of all the information and the point of view on it that I had, I mean, if I hadn't done that, I would have been neglecting something that it's clear to me the Lord was giving me to pursue. And but that is something that I couldn't in any way put that on anybody else. Even another priest ordained by McCarrick,
Hmm.
they might, they just might not see things the same way or have the same
Sure.
way of approaching things. So it's not, no one else would have the duty to do something like that, like in the way that I would. But by the same token, I mean, I think that is part of what ecclesiastical authority has to recognize, is that everybody has their own unique talents that they bring to what they offer the church. And so in this case, I mean, the Lord cut me out as a writer, as someone who would know how to use a blog and would know how to synthesize this information.
Hmm.
Um, and for it to be proposed to me that is somehow a contradiction of my vocation, which is pretty much what I've been told. I mean,
Hmm.
that's not true. I can't accept that. I mean,
Right.
it's like he's asking me to be somebody other than who I am. I can't do that. Am I
Right.
making sense when I say that?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, and the only question that I have remaining is that when you did this and you decided to move down this path, you brought a lot of people with you because you had these two parishes.
Right,
Did you have any regrets about the fact that some of the people in those parishes, you've got tremendous support. I know that.
right,
And I don't know I don't think you'd ever want to take a vote on this thing, but my guess is that you are so beloved in both parishes that people are praying daily for you to have this resolved and for you to be able to come back to them.
Mhm.
But did you have any regrets at that point to say, okay, what am I doing to the people that are in these parishes? Or did you just say, I think this is what I should be doing. I'm being called to do this by Christ, and he will take care of whatever's going to happen here.
Right. No,
I
I
mean,
appreciate
did that
it.
block you from making your own decision with the discernment that you got through your prayer life?
Right. No, that's a really excellent question. And that's pretty much where I was all through December, January, February, into March. I mean, because let's back up a tiny little bit. I mean, that the people did were not had no obligation to be interested in my the way that I was understanding what happened with Theodore McCarrick. I mean,
Right,
that going back a couple of years. I mean, I recognize that. I mean, I never told anyone they had to read my blog. I mean, that
right,
was,
right.
and I think the people appreciated that because it's not necessarily their concern in and of
Hmm.
itself. Uh, but then the whole dynamic of that changed when this threat was hanging over me from the bishop after his visit in
Right.
November, that if I continued blogging, that the my ministry would be disrupted and I wouldn't be able to continue.
Hmm.
And I knew that would be a destabilizing and difficult thing for the people to deal with. That people, like you said, I mean, that for good or real, they kind of like having me around, and
Hmm.
they didn't want that to happen, and I didn't want to do that to anybody or myself. So I mean, it was like 3 months plus of really getting to the point where I knew the Lord was saying to me, sooner or later, you're going to have to stand up and turn your
Right.
blind back on. I mean, that is an imperative
Hmm.
upon you, that um, who you are, what you stand for, your own future as a priest, being able to minister as a priest with any confidence
Right.
and love for what you're doing. You have to do that,
Hmm.
and it's just so that was clear to me late February, early March, and it was just a matter of when is that day going to come. And we talked about this the last time.
Right. It was,
When the
yeah,
virus came, it seemed like
COVID. Yeah.
as clear a sign as I could possibly get. I mean,
Right. Right. Right.
um,
Amazing.
yeah.
Very, very well said. I have no more questions. I honor you more than I've ever honored you, just because of the fact that you were able to explain all that stuff and shown your true heart. So
Oh,
I appreciate all that.
oh, thank you. It's a pleasure being able to talk to you. And
All right.
we got it all in before Dylan woke up.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Thank you very much. I
Okay.
appreciate
Yeah.
you.
Okay. All right. Talk to you
God,
soon.
God bless.
You too. Bye bye.